Australia, a land of deserts, oceans, and extraordinary diversity. And yet few know that Islam has been part of this continent's story for centuries, far earlier than most would imagine. The earliest contact between Muslims and the Australian continent dates back to the 1700s, long before British colonization. From at least the early 18th century, Muslim Macassan traders from what is now Sulawesi, Indonesia, sailed south to northern Australia. They came in search of trepang, or sea cucumber, a delicacy in China, and forged strong relationships with the Yolngu people of Arnhem Land in the Northern Territory. The Macassans brought not only goods like tobacco, rice, and cloth, but also cultural and religious influence. Some Yolngu oral histories and song lines describe the arrival of these visitors. Macassan words were absorbed into Aboriginal languages, and elements of Islamic practice such as prayer positions and crescent motifs became part of the cultural exchange. This interaction continued peacefully for over 200 years until the early 20th century, when government restrictions ended the Macassan trade voyages. A new chapter of Islamic presence began in the mid-19th century, not by sea but through the vast, unforgiving inland deserts of the Australian continent. In the 1860s, as colonial expansion pushed deeper into Central Australia, came the arrival of Muslim cameleers, mainly from Afghanistan, Baluchistan, and British India. These men, collectively known as Afghans, played a pivotal role in exploring and supplying the Australian interior. They transported goods, water, and mail across vast distances, often in extreme conditions. Their camels were critical to projects such as the Overland Telegraph Line in the 1870s and the Trans-Australian Railway in the early 20th century. The cameleers also built Australia's first mosques. The earliest known permanent mosque was constructed in Murray, South Australia, in 1882, followed by others in Adelaide, 1888, and Broken Hill, 1891. These places of worship were not just centers for prayer, but also for community life, cultural preservation, and spiritual strength in a challenging land. Despite their contributions, the cameleers faced isolation and exclusion. Under the White Australia policy, they were denied citizenship, voting rights, and the ability to bring families. Many returned home, but some remained, intermarrying with local communities and leaving behind descendants who quietly carried forward their story. From the early 1900s to the mid-20th century, Muslim presence in Australia remained small but constant. A few Indian and Malay Muslims arrived as hawkers, pearl divers, and labourers. They settled in towns across Queensland, Western Australia, and New South Wales, often living on the fringes of society, but maintaining their faith in modest prayer spaces. The White Australia policy, formally enacted in 1901, largely restricted non-European immigration, limiting the expansion of Muslim communities. However, the end of World War II marked a turning point. In the 1950s and 60s, Australia sought to boost its workforce through immigration agreements. Though still Eurocentric, small numbers of Turkish, Lebanese, and Bosnian Muslims were welcomed as part of these programs. Turkish migration, in particular, shaped early Muslim communities in Melbourne, Sydney, and Adelaide. Bosnian Muslims, many of whom fled conflict in Europe, brought with them rich traditions and deep religious heritage, contributing to Islamic architecture, education, and civic life. The 1970s brought another major change. Australia officially dismantled the White Australia policy in 1973, embracing multiculturalism as a national identity. This shift paved the way for broader and more diverse Muslim migration. The Lebanese Civil War 1975 to 1990, saw many Muslims arrive as refugees. In the 1980s and 1990s, further waves arrived from Afghanistan, Iraq, Somalia, Sudan, Pakistan, and Indonesia, seeking refuge, education, and opportunity. These new arrivals helped reshape Islam in Australia, no longer confined to isolated outposts, but growing in urban centers. Mosques began to flourish, not only as houses of worship, but as cultural hubs, offering language classes, youth programs, charity drives, and interfaith outreach. Islamic schools were established to provide faith-based education in English. Community organizations emerged to serve the needs of diverse ethnic backgrounds: Arab, Turkish, African, Malay, Bosnian, South Asian, and Australian-born Muslims. By the early 2000s, Islam had become one of Australia's fastest-growing religions. According to the 2016 census, the Muslim population stood at over 600,000. By 2021, it exceeded 813,000, around 3.2% of the national population. But this visibility brought challenges as well. Following the 9/11 attacks in 2001 and the Bali bombings in 2002, Muslims in Australia faced increased scrutiny, media stereotyping, and political pressure. Mosques were vandalized. Women in hijab faced harassment. Policies around national security, surveillance, and immigration sometimes placed Muslim communities under suspicion. Despite this, Muslims across Australia responded by deepening civic engagement. Community leaders launched education campaigns, interfaith initiatives, and public dialogues to build understanding. Mosques opened their doors to neighbors, schools, and journalists. Youth groups developed programs to address identity, mental health, and belonging. Across suburbs in Sydney, Melbourne, Perth, and Brisbane, Australian Muslims have become deeply embedded in everyday life as teachers, engineers, students, business owners, artists, athletes, and public servants. Islam in Australia is now marked not only by its diversity, Sunni, Shia, Sufi, Ahmadiyya, but also by the integration of faith and local culture. The National Mosque Open Day, held annually since 2014, welcomes thousands of non-Muslims to explore mosques, ask questions, and share food, an example of how faith and multiculturalism can coexist in harmony. In regional towns like Katanning, Western Australia, and Shepparton, Victoria, Muslim communities have revitalized local economies through halal farming and community-based enterprise. In Darwin, the legacy of the Macassans is commemorated through cultural festivals and Aboriginal Muslim collaborations. And in the heart of Australia's major cities, soaring minarets and domes reflect a faith that has taken root, adapted, and flourished. Today, Australian Islam is not foreign or imported. It is woven into the social fabric of the nation, from the prayer stones of Arnhem Land to the camel tracks of the Outback to the urban mosques of Lakemba, Broadmeadows, and Dianella. The story of Islam in Australia is long, layered, and deeply human. It is a story of faith without conquest, of migration without erasure, of community built across oceans, deserts, and generations. As Australia continues to evolve, the presence of Islam and the contribution of its followers stands not as an exception, but as an essential part of the nation's shared history and future.